Have you ever stopped to wonder how many of your friends would still be around if you lost everything today? How many truly listen to you, and how many just tolerate you while you're useful? The truth is uncomfortable. Many people who smile at you are secretly feeding off your light. And Carl Jung knew this. He didn't see human relationships as open affection, but as hidden games of projection, envy, emotional dependence, and control. You might be surrounded, but not supported. The support you feel could just be the illusion your soul desperately wants to believe. Most friendships aren't born from love, but from emotional convenience. In this video, we'll reveal how Jung saw the invisible relationships that slowly drain us. You'll finally understand why you feel exhausted, even among people who claim to love you. And maybe, by the end, you'll realize that being alone was always the first step toward finding your truth. The mirror game. Jung discovered something disturbing about human connection. Most people don't actually see you when they look at you. They see themselves. They see their own fears, their own desires, their own unfinished business staring back at them through your eyes. This is why conversations feel so strange sometimes. You're talking about your dreams, but they're hearing their own disappointments. You're sharing your struggles, but they're reliving their own failures. You're not having a real conversation at all. You're just two people talking to mirrors. The scary part is how automatic this becomes. Your friend says they're happy for your success, but their voice carries a weight that doesn't match their words. They're not seeing your achievement, they're seeing everything they haven't accomplished yet. They're seeing the gap between where you are and where they think they should be. Jung called this projection, and it happens everywhere. The person who always calls you lucky when good things happen to you isn't celebrating your wins. They're protecting themselves from facing their own role in their outcomes. The friend who gets weird when you start dating someone new isn't worried about you. They're facing their own loneliness and calling it concern. This creates a twisted dynamic where people love you for being their emotional mirror, but they also resent you for it. They need you to reflect back what they want to see, but they hate you for showing them what they don't want to face. You become both their comfort and their trigger, often in the same conversation. The most painful part is how this affects your own sense of self. When people are constantly seeing their own stuff in you, you start to lose track of who you actually are. You begin to wonder if their version of you is more real than your own experience. You start to question your own thoughts and feelings because they don't match what others are projecting onto you. Jung understood that most people are unconscious of this process. They genuinely believe they're seeing you clearly, but they're actually seeing through the lens of their own unhealed wounds and unfulfilled desires. They're not lying to you, they're lying to themselves, and you're caught in the crossfire. This is why some friendships feel exhausting, even when nothing dramatic happens. You're not just managing your own emotions, you're unconsciously managing theirs too. You're trying to be yourself, while also being their mirror, their projection screen, their emotional reference point. The tragedy is that real connection becomes impossible when this is happening. You can't truly know someone who's only seeing themselves when they look at you. And you can't truly be known by someone who needs you to be their reflection rather than your own person. Jung believed that becoming aware of this pattern was the first step toward authentic relationships. But awareness comes with a price. Once you see how often people are talking to their own projections instead of talking to you, you can't unsee it. You start to notice the moments when their response doesn't match what you actually said. You start to feel the weight of carrying their unconscious material along with your own. The question becomes, what do you do with this knowledge? Do you call people out on their projections? Do you try to hand their stuff back to them? Or do you simply start to protect your own energy by recognizing when you're being used as someone else's mirror? Jung's answer was complex but clear. You start by stopping your own projections first. You learn to see people as they actually are, not as reflections of your own inner world. Only then can you begin to attract and maintain relationships with others who are doing the same work. Energy vampires. There's a type of person Jung recognized who seems to survive by feeding off the life force of others. They don't do it consciously and they're not evil, but they've learned to get their emotional needs met by draining the energy of everyone around them. They're like batteries that never learned how to charge themselves. You know these people. They're the ones who always have a crisis when you have good news. They're the ones who turn every conversation back to their problems. They're the ones who somehow leave you feeling empty after every interaction, even when you can't quite put your finger on why. Jung saw this as a failure of individual development. These people never learn to generate their own emotional stability, so they unconsciously seek it from others. They're not choosing to be draining. They're operating from a deep, often unconscious belief that they can't survive without constantly drawing from external sources. The subtle signs are everywhere once you start looking. They always have more problems than solutions. They ask for advice, but never take it. They want you to feel their pain more than they want to heal from it. They're attracted to your strength, but unconsciously work to weaken it because strength that isn't theirs threatens their sense of security. What makes this particularly confusing is that these people often appear to be caring and connected. They remember your problems. They check in on you. They seem emotionally available. But there's something off about the quality of their attention. They're not really listening to understand you. They're listening to find ways to connect your experience back to their own needs. Jung understood that this dynamic creates a twisted form of intimacy. The energy vampire feels close to you because they're constantly taking from you. But you feel distant from them because the relationship is fundamentally one-sided. You're giving your energy, but you're not receiving energy back. You're receiving need, demand, and emotional hunger. The most dangerous part is how these relationships can make you feel special at first. Being needed feels like being loved. Having someone depend on you emotionally can feel like having a deep connection. But need isn't love, and dependence isn't connection. Love energizes you. Need drains you. These people often have a talent for finding your weak spots. They know exactly how to trigger your desire to help, your fear of being selfish, your need to be needed. They've learned to survive by becoming experts at reading what others want to give, and then positioning themselves to receive it. Jung noticed that energy vampires often surround themselves with people who were taught that their value comes from what they can provide for others. They find the givers, the fixers, the people who feel guilty when they're not helping someone. It's not a conscious strategy. It's more like a survival instinct that operates below the level of awareness. The relationship becomes a slow drain that's hard to notice because it happens gradually. You start to feel tired more often. You start to dread their calls. You start to feel guilty for wanting space. You start to question whether you're being selfish for wanting relationships that energize you instead of depleting you. What's particularly cruel is how these people often make you feel responsible for their emotional state. When you try to set boundaries, they make you feel like you're abandoning them. When you're happy, they find ways to bring the mood down. When you're struggling, they compete with your pain by making theirs seem worse. They have an uncanny ability to sense when you're feeling strong and independent. That's exactly when they'll show up with their latest crisis. It's as if they can feel your energy rising and need to tap into it before you use it for yourself. Your good mood becomes their opportunity. Your clarity becomes their confusion. Jung realized that these people fear your growth because it threatens their supply. If you become too self-sufficient, too happy, too stable, you might not need to be needed anymore. And if you don't need to be needed, what use are you to them? This is why they unconsciously sabotage your progress while claiming to support it. The hardest part is that these people often genuinely suffer. Their pain is real. Their struggles are legitimate, but they've learned to use their pain as a tool to extract energy from others instead of using it as fuel for their own growth. They've become addicted to the temporary relief that comes from having someone else carry their emotional weight. Breaking free from these dynamics requires understanding that you're not responsible for other people's emotional survival. You're not required to be someone's life support system. You're not obligated to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Jung believed that enabling someone's emotional dependence actually prevents them from developing their own inner resources. The hard truth is that many people who claim to love you are actually addicted to what you provide for them. They're not addicted to you as a person. They're addicted to the feeling of being emotionally fed by you. And like any addiction, it requires more and more to create the same effect. Jung's solution wasn't to become cold or uncaring. It was to learn the difference between supporting someone's growth and enabling their dependence. Real love sometimes means letting people face their own emotional hunger so they can learn to feed themselves. Real friendship sometimes means saying no to someone's needs so they can discover their own strength. The moment you stop being available as an energy source, you'll discover who was really your friend and who was just feeding off your light. The mask collection. Jung discovered something terrifying about human relationships. Most people don't actually know each other at all. They're just in love with each other's masks. And the scariest part, we all have a whole collection of them, stored away like costumes in a closet, ready to be worn whenever we need to become what someone else wants us to be. Think about it. How many different versions of yourself do you become throughout a single day? There's the version you are at work, the version you are with your family, the version you are with different groups of friends. Each mask is carefully crafted to give people exactly what they expect from you, exactly what will make them comfortable, exactly what will keep them from rejecting you. Jung called this the persona, but it's more than just putting on a professional face. It's the way we unconsciously shapeshift to fit into other people's expectations. We become chameleons, changing our colors so quickly that we forget what our original color was. We become so good at being what others want that we lose track of who we actually are underneath all those layers. The tragedy is that most of your friendships are built on these masks, not on your real self. People love the version of you that makes them feel good about themselves. They love the version that doesn't challenge them, doesn't trigger their insecurities, doesn't remind them of their own unhealed wounds. They love the mask, and they'll fight to keep it on you even when it's suffocating you. This is why it feels so lonely even when you're surrounded by people. They're not really with you. They're with the character you're playing. They're in relationship with your performance, not your person. And deep down you know it. You know that if you took off the mask, if you showed them who you really are, many of them would disappear. Jung understood that we create these masks as a survival strategy. We learn early in life that certain parts of ourselves are acceptable and others aren't. We learn that being angry makes people uncomfortable, so we develop a nice mask. We learn that being vulnerable makes people awkward, so we develop a strong mask. We learn that being ourselves sometimes makes people leave, so we develop masks that make people stay. But here's the twisted part. The masks that keep people around are also the things that keep them from truly knowing you. You're trading authentic connection for the illusion of acceptance. You're choosing the comfort of being liked over the risk of being loved for who you actually are. The people who demand your masks are showing you something important about themselves. They're telling you that they need you to be predictable, manageable, non-threatening. They need you to stay within the boundaries of their comfort zone. They need you to be the version of yourself that fits neatly into their worldview without disrupting anything. What's particularly cruel is how these people often claim to want authenticity while punishing you for showing it. They say they want you to be yourself, but they get uncomfortable when your real self doesn't match their expectations. They want the safe version of your authenticity, the version that doesn't challenge their own masks. Jung noticed that mask wearing becomes addictive. The more you do it, the more you need to do it. You start to believe that your worth depends on how well you can perform for others. You start to measure your value by how comfortable you can make other people feel. You start to think that love is something you earn by being what others want you to be. The masks also create a strange kind of exhaustion. You're constantly monitoring yourself, adjusting your behavior, managing your energy to maintain the performance. You're never fully relaxed because you're always slightly performing. You're never fully present because part of you is always watching to make sure you're being the right version of yourself. This is why some people feel drained by social situations, even when they're supposedly enjoying themselves. They're not just being social. They're performing socially. They're not just hanging out. They're managing multiple personas, making sure each person gets the version of them that keeps the peace. Jung believed that the path to real relationships required gradually removing these masks, but he also warned that this process would reveal who your real friends are. The people who are attached to your masks will resist your authenticity. They'll try to pull you back into the roles that serve their needs. They'll make you feel guilty for changing, for growing, for becoming more yourself. The hardest part is that taking off your masks feels like losing yourself at first. You've been wearing them for so long that you've forgotten what you look like without them. You've been performing for so long that you've forgotten what it feels like to just be. You've been giving people what they want for so long that you've forgotten what you actually want. But Jung knew that this temporary discomfort was the price of authentic connection. Real relationships can only happen between real people, not between masks. And real people are messy, complicated, imperfect, and sometimes uncomfortable. But they're also alive in a way that masks can never be. Emotional leeches. There's a particular type of person Jung observed who doesn't just drain your energy. They feed specifically on your emotions. They're like emotional parasites who've learned to survive by attaching themselves to your feelings and sucking them dry. They don't want your time or your money. They want your emotional reactions, your sympathy, your anger, your joy. They want to consume your feelings as if they were food. These people have a strange relationship with emotions. They can't seem to generate their own stable emotional states, so they create situations that will produce emotions in others, and then they feed off those emotions. They're like emotional farmers who plant seeds of drama, crisis, and chaos in your life so they can harvest your emotional responses. Jung saw this as a form of emotional vampirism that's different from simple neediness. These people don't just want your help or your attention, they want your emotional energy. They want to feel your feelings because they can't access their own. They want to live through your emotional experiences because their own emotional life feels empty or numb. The scary part is how skilled they become at triggering specific emotions in you. They know exactly what to say to make you angry, worried, guilty, or sad. They know how to push your buttons, not because they want to hurt you, but because they want to feel the emotional energy that comes from your reactions. Your emotions become their entertainment, their drug, their way of feeling alive. These people often have a talent for creating emotional emergencies. There's always a crisis, always a drama, always something that requires your immediate emotional response. They don't want you to solve their problems. They want you to feel their problems. They want you to get swept up in their emotional chaos because that's how they connect with their own feelings. Jung understood that this creates a twisted form of intimacy. The emotional leech feels close to you because they're constantly feeding off your emotional energy, but you feel confused and drained because the relationship is fundamentally extractive. You're providing emotional fuel, but you're not receiving emotional nourishment back. What makes this particularly confusing is that these people often seem very emotionally aware and connected. They talk about feelings constantly. They seem to care deeply about emotional issues. They appear to be sensitive and empathetic, but there's something off about the quality of their emotional engagement. They're not really feeling with you. They're feeling through you. They have an uncanny ability to sense when you're in a good mood and find ways to complicate it. Not because they want to make you unhappy, but because they want to create emotional turbulence that they can feed off. Your peace threatens their supply. Your stability makes them feel emotionally hungry. Your contentment feels like emotional starvation to them. Jung noticed that emotional leeches often surround themselves with people who have strong emotional responses. They seek out the passionate, the empathetic, the reactive. They find people who feel things deeply and then position themselves to benefit from those deep feelings. They become addicted to the emotional intensity that others can provide. The relationship becomes a cycle of emotional extraction. They create situations that produce emotions in you. They feed off those emotions. They feel temporarily satisfied. And then they need to create more situations to get their next emotional fix. Your feelings become their addiction. And like any addiction, it requires more and more to create the same effect. What's particularly cruel is how these people often make you feel responsible for their emotional state, while simultaneously feeding off your emotional responses to that responsibility. They'll tell you that your reaction is hurting them, while secretly enjoying the emotional energy that your reaction provides. They'll make you feel guilty for having emotions, while depending on those emotions for their own emotional survival. They have a way of making every emotional situation about them. If you're sad, they'll find a way to make it about their sadness. If you're happy, they'll find a way to make it about their lack of happiness. If you're angry, they'll find a way to make it about how your anger affects them. They're emotional black holes that suck all the emotional energy in the room toward themselves. Jung realized that these people fear your emotional independence because it threatens their supply. If you become too emotionally self-sufficient, too stable in your own feelings, you might not need to share your emotional energy with them anymore. And if you don't provide emotional reactions, what use are you to them? This is why they unconsciously sabotage your emotional growth while claiming to support it. Breaking free from emotional leeches requires understanding that you're not responsible for providing emotional experiences for other people. Your feelings are not food for others to consume. Your emotional responses are not entertainment for others to enjoy. Your emotional energy is not a resource that others are entitled to extract from you. The hard truth is that many people who claim to care about your feelings are actually addicted to consuming them. They're not interested in your emotional well-being. They're interested in your emotional availability. They don't want you to be happy. They want you to be emotionally reactive so they can feed off that reactivity. Jung's solution was to learn to guard your emotional energy as carefully as you guard your physical energy. Real emotional connection energizes both people. Real emotional intimacy creates more emotional capacity, not less. Real emotional friendship leaves you feeling more emotionally alive, not emotionally depleted. The projection trap. Jung made a disturbing discovery about human nature. Most people don't actually hate you for who you are. They hate you for who they are. When someone has a strong negative reaction to you that seems out of proportion to what you've actually done, you're usually not seeing their response to you. You're seeing their response to themselves, projected onto you like a movie playing on a screen. This is one of the most painful aspects of human relationships, and it happens everywhere. The person who calls you selfish is often struggling with their own selfishness. The person who accuses you of being fake is usually hiding behind their own masks. The person who criticizes your choices is often angry about their own decisions. They're not really seeing you at all. They're seeing their own shadow reflected back at them, and they're attacking you for showing them what they don't want to face about themselves. Jung understood that this happens because most people are unconscious of their own dark sides. They can't acknowledge their own flaws, their own mistakes, their own ugly impulses, so they push these qualities out of their awareness and then see them everywhere else. They become experts at spotting in others exactly what they refuse to see in themselves. The cruelest part is how personal these attacks feel. When someone projects their own issues onto you, they do it with such conviction, such emotional intensity, that you start to question yourself. You start to wonder if maybe they're right. Maybe you are selfish, maybe you are fake, maybe you are making bad choices. You begin to doubt your own perception because their projection feels so real, so certain, so justified. What makes this particularly confusing is that there's often a grain of truth in what they're saying. We all have selfish moments. We all wear masks sometimes. We all make questionable choices. But they're taking that small grain of truth and blowing it up into your entire identity because they can't face that same grain of truth in themselves. They're using your small flaws to avoid looking at their bigger ones. Jung noticed that projection often happens in relationships where people are similar to each other. We're most likely to project onto people who remind us of ourselves, who trigger our own unresolved issues, who show us qualities we possess but don't want to acknowledge. This is why the people who know you best are often the ones who hurt you most deeply. They're not just attacking you, they're attacking themselves through you. The projection trap becomes a prison for everyone involved. The projector becomes trapped in their own denial, never able to grow because they're always fighting their own shadows in other people. The person being projected onto becomes trapped in defending themselves against accusations that aren't really about them, fighting battles that can never be won because the real battle is happening inside someone else's mind. This dynamic destroys relationships because it makes real communication impossible. When someone is projecting onto you, they're not talking to you. They're talking to their own reflection. They're not hearing what you're actually saying. They're hearing their own inner critic, their own fears, their own self-judgment. You could be perfect and they'd still find something to criticize because the criticism isn't really about you. Jung observed that projection often gets worse when people are stressed, threatened, or insecure. When someone feels bad about themselves, they need somewhere to put those bad feelings, and you become the target. When someone is ashamed of their own behavior, they need to find that behavior in someone else to avoid facing their own shame. When someone is disappointed in themselves, they need to find disappointment in others to avoid feeling their own pain. The most painful part is how these projections can stick to you even after the person is gone. You start to internalize their criticism. You start to see yourself through their distorted lens. You start to believe that their projection is actually your reality. You begin to carry their shame, their guilt, their self-hatred as if it were your own. This is why some people can make you feel terrible about yourself even when you haven't done anything wrong. They're not responding to your actions. They're responding to their own unhealed wounds, their own unacknowledged flaws, their own unresolved conflicts. But they're making you carry the weight of their internal struggles. Jung understood that the people who project most heavily onto you are often the ones who are most similar to you in ways they can't admit. They see in you the potential they've given up on, the choices they wish they'd made, the person they could have been if they'd been braver. And instead of using you as inspiration, they use you as a target for their own self-hatred. Breaking free from projection traps requires understanding that other people's opinions of you are usually more about them than about you. Their criticism is their confession. Their judgment is their mirror. Their attack is their autobiography. When someone tells you who you are, they're usually telling you who they are, or who they're afraid they are, or who they're ashamed to be. The hardest part is learning not to take other people's projections personally. When someone accuses you of something that doesn't fit, instead of defending yourself, you can start to wonder what they're really struggling with. When someone attacks you for qualities you don't possess, you can start to see it as information about their inner world, not yours. Jung believed that becoming aware of projection was essential for authentic relationships, but he also knew that most people would rather project their problems onto others than face them in themselves. This means that choosing to stop participating in projection games will cost you some relationships. Some people need you to be their projection screen more than they need you to be yourself. The people who truly care about you will be willing to look at their own projections instead of making you carry them. They'll be curious about their own reactions instead of certain about your flaws. They'll use their triggered responses as opportunities for self-reflection instead of ammunition for attack. Fair-weather friends. Jung observed a particular type of person who only shows up when the weather is good. They're present for your successes, but absent for your struggles. They want to bask in your light when you're shining, but they disappear when you're going through dark times. They're like emotional tourists who only visit when the conditions are perfect for them. These people love being around you when you're winning. They want to be seen with you when you're successful, happy, confident, and strong. They want to be part of your good times, your celebrations, your achievements. They want to share in your joy, but they don't want to share in your pain. They want the benefits of being connected to you without the responsibilities that come with real friendship. Jung understood that these relationships are fundamentally transactional. These people don't love you. They love what you can do for them, how you can make them feel, what you can provide for them. When you're up, you make them feel good about themselves. When you're down, you make them feel uncomfortable, so they avoid you. You're not a person to them, you're a mood enhancer. The most painful part is how these people often seem like your closest friends when things are going well. They're the ones cheering the loudest at your victories. They're the ones who want to celebrate with you, who want to be part of your success story. They make you feel loved and supported and connected, but it's all conditional on your circumstances remaining favorable. When life gets difficult, when you're struggling, when you need support, these people suddenly become very busy. They have excuses for why they can't be there. They have reasons why they can't help. They have explanations for why they need to keep their distance. They don't explicitly abandon you, but they make themselves unavailable exactly when you need them most. Jung saw this as a form of emotional cowardice. These people are afraid of pain, discomfort, and difficulty. They're afraid that your problems will become their problems, that your struggles will bring them down, that your darkness will dim their light. They protect their own emotional comfort by avoiding anyone who might require them to face something unpleasant. What makes this particularly hurtful is how these people often justify their absence. They'll tell you that they're not good with emotional situations. They'll say they don't know how to help. They'll claim they're giving you space to figure things out. They'll make their abandonment sound like a gift, their absence sound like wisdom, their desertion sound like support. These people reveal their true nature during your worst moments. When you're facing a crisis, when you're dealing with loss, when you're going through a difficult time, they show you who they really are. They show you that their friendship was never about you as a person. It was about you as a source of good feelings, positive energy, and social status. Jung noticed that fair-weather friends often have a talent for sensing when your circumstances are changing. They can feel when your energy is shifting, when your mood is dropping, when your situation is becoming challenging, and they start to pull away before you even realize you need them. They distance themselves preemptively to avoid having to deal with your difficulties. The relationship becomes a performance where you feel pressure to always be okay, always be strong, always be positive. You learn not to share your struggles because you know it will make them uncomfortable. You learn not to ask for help because you know they'll find ways to avoid providing it. You learn to hide your pain because you know it will drive them away. This creates a lonely kind of friendship where you're only allowed to be half of yourself. You can share your victories but not your defeats. You can share your joy but not your sorrow. You can share your strength but not your vulnerability. You're in relationship with people who only want the edited version of your life, the highlight reel, the success story. Jung understood that these people often have their own unresolved issues with difficulty and pain. They avoid your struggles because they're avoiding their own. They can't be present for your dark times because they can't be present for their own. They're running from their own shadows, and they need you to stay in the light so they don't have to face the darkness. The tragedy is that these relationships prevent real intimacy from developing. True connection happens when people can be present for each other through all kinds of weather. Real friendship means showing up not just when it's easy and fun, but when it's hard and uncomfortable. Authentic love means being willing to sit with someone in their darkness, not just dance with them in their light. Breaking free from fair-weather friendships requires accepting that some people are only capable of surface-level connection. They can't go deep because they're afraid of what they might find there. They can't handle complexity because they're trying to keep their own lives simple. They can't offer support because they're barely supporting themselves. Jung's insight was that these people aren't necessarily bad or wrong. They're just limited in their capacity for authentic relationship. They're operating at a level of emotional development where they can only handle the easy parts of human connection. Recognizing this limitation can help you adjust your expectations and stop trying to get depth from people who can only offer surface. The people who truly care about you will show up regardless of the weather. They'll be there when you're struggling, not just when you're succeeding. They'll love you in your darkness, not just in your light. They'll stick around through the storms, not just enjoy the sunshine.